Good
Um,
morning.
so everyone, welcome to the play seminars today. And this hour we will be discussing As You Like It. And in the 10 o'clock hour, we'll be discussing Guys and Dolls. So you're welcome to stay for one or both or part of either. My name is Kate McPherson. This is my first year at the festival as a play seminar director. I've been coming to the festival for about 17 years. I am lucky enough to be on the faculty just up the road at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. And I'm joined this year by a play seminar director whose name is also Kate.
Good morning, the other Kate. So if you just shout Kate, one of us is going to answer your question. The Kate in the morning show is what you're getting. I'm Kate Moncrief, and I am a professor and chair of the English department at Washington College in Chestertown, Maryland. So I'm from the other side of the country. I've been coming to this festival for quite a long time because my longtime scholarly collaborator, Kate, lives in Utah. So
We've been working together for about 20, we've known each other for about 22 years. We met as graduate students at the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C. And so we're really happy to be here together. Many of you may have been coming to seminars for many years or to the festival. How many of you have been coming to the festival? This is not your first time. Okay.
welcome
Yes,
back.
that's the majority of you. Okay, let's welcome the newcomers. Who's new for the first time this year to the festival? Welcome. You'll soon figure out how this works. So today, and in the very first week of the festival always, while the shows are in previews and just opening, we're lucky enough to be joined by some of the artistic staff who work on the shows. And so we have with us today, and we'll be speaking with them shortly, the director of the play, Robin Rodriguez, and her very important dramaturg. This is Isabel Smith Bernstein. Steen. Want to get it right. And so we're really happy to be here. If you've come in the past to the seminars, you may have had Nancy Mellick leading the seminar or Ace Pilkington. Nancy has retired, although she'll still be coming to the festival to enjoy the shows in the first week of August. Ace will still be here sort of periodically throughout the summer. He'll be popping in and out, so you can tell your friends. But we are so thrilled to be here to facilitate these discussions, to answer your questions. We're going to start today with some background on the play itself, some historical context and background on the play, and then we'll move into some questions with Robin and Isabel, and then we'll move to your questions toward the end. We want to make sure you have plenty of time to share your ideas, to ask questions, to get things clarified, to just clear things up and share your thoughts. So I'm going to turn the time over to my partner.
Thank you. We should also say, as the sun moves, please feel free to get up and move. It's fine to adjust your seating. These are going to be replaced, but not today. So we were not going to be bothered by you moving around, being a little bit more comfortable as the sun shifts. So a little bit about As You Like It, this particular play. How many people have seen a production of As You Like It before or know this play? Great. So this is familiar to some of you. This play is written in about 1599, and it's believed to have been performed at court at either Richmond House or Wilton, but we don't know that for sure. There's no actual record of a performance until the restoration in 1669, but it's believed to have been performed at court. The text of As You Like It is less complicated than some of Shakespeare's other texts because there is no quarto version. The first published version is in the folio of 1623. It is based on a 1590 prose romance by a guy named Thomas Lodge. This prose romance is called Rosalind. So one of the things we might want to think about is really Rosalind's play, Rosalind's story, right? Rosalind has among the most lines of all of Shakespeare's female characters. Why might Shakespeare have changed the title to As You Like It from Lodge? This play is also firmly rooted in the historical time period of the 1590s. Couple of things to think about. One, in the 1590s, there was an incredible vogue or trend for sonnets. So any writer who was trying to make a name for himself was showing off by writing sonnets. You're going to see this theme going through. If you're going to see Shakespeare in Love, you're going to see Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet is 1595. So we're really rooted in the 1590s. Midsummer Night's Dream is 1595, Elizabethan. So it's fun to watch what what Shakespeare does with sonnets, the kind of use and the kind of parodying he does in As You Like It. You're also going to see um, this particular genre. We know it's a comedy. Shakespeare's comedies, the most typical thing that happens is courtship and marriage, that particular pattern, wooing. As we get to the later plays, Shakespeare starts to complicate it, right? Things go awry, amiss. That's usually what's happening. How are these lovers going to get together? This particular play has 4 sets of lovers to watch. It's also a little subgenre called pastoral comedy. So the thing about the pastoral, also in the late 16th century, this becomes a fad or a trend. So what is happening in London is that London is growing as a city. The population is increasing, and many people are moving into the city from the countryside. We have enclosure happening. So a lot of these former monasteries that had been public lands that everybody could graze their sheep on and grow their vegetables are given to nobles, and they put up fences, right? So people are going into the city and they're looking for work. As the city grows, it's a vibrant, exciting place, can also be a really difficult place. And so a nostalgia for the countryside begins to develop. This idea of merry old England, this idea of aren't things wonderful in the countryside? So, philosophical shepherds, pretty shepherdesses, leisure time, hanging out in the country. So, Shakespeare is embedded in this pastoral tradition. Other people are using it as well. You're going to see it in Midsummer Night's Dream a bit. But one of the things that Shakespeare tends to do is he tends to use the genre, he uses the form, the sonnet or the pastoral, but then he's going to change it up. He's going to complicate it, he's going to subvert it, he's going to take a right turn in particular ways. So he depends on us to understand we're right there with you, we're in the pastoral, and then he's going to do something really, really interesting with the pastoral. So that's probably enough historical background. Let's turn to our guests for a few questions here. And I'd like to start with Robin, our director. And this particular play, As You Like It, I think many of us, as we reach midlife, if we've been studying Shakespeare for a long time, we develop a long relationship with the plays. When did we first encounter them? Why are they special to us? Could you first talk about your relationship to As You Like It?
The first time I saw As You Like It, when I was in high school. Hello.
That works.
I was in high school when I saw my first production of As You Like It. Many touring companies would come to San Francisco, and there was a touring company from the Young Vic in England that came to San Francisco to do an all-male production of the play at the Geary Theater. And I still remember it vividly. And it was after that, maybe by the time I was by the time I was 20, I was in drama school, and one of the shows that my school was going to do, my conservatory was linked to a company. The company had decided to produce a production of As You Like It in the spring, and it would then go into the summer season. And I was cast as Celia in that production. Uh, it was a seminal moment in my young life as a theater person. Um, it was my first real big Shakespeare part in a place that wasn't high school or summer school. Um, it was a memorable production for a lot of us who were in it, but certainly a lot of people who saw it. I met my husband working on that production.
Oh, wow.
Who was assisting the scenic designer, Mr. Richard Hay. And so ever since then, my fondness for the play has always been very present for me.
And is this your first time directing As You Like It?
This is the first time I've ever directed As You Like It, yes.
Could you talk a little bit about this particular production in terms of your vision and concept for the show?
Yeah, I'm a kind of meat and potatoes gal, so especially when you're working with the brilliance of William Shakespeare, the idea of doing something with it is not the first thing that comes to my mind, because I feel like the stories of the plays are fine on their own. And my job really is to help illuminate those stories, as opposed to take my idea of what I think Shakespeare was saying. And however, we are going to produce the play in a certain way, and because we decided, the artistic leadership here at the festival decided that Romeo and Juliet and Shakespeare in Love would be very, very Elizabethan. The idea of doing something else with, As You Like It, in and around those periods, spoke to the artistic directors. And so I really couldn't justify a Jacobean production of As You Like It because that seemed a little dark. Um, but as I was doing some research, I thought, well, why not look into Cromwellian England? And um, and so it was the English Civil War period that got interesting to us, with the idea that uh, you had Oliver Cromwell and his parliamentarians who went against Charles I. Cromwell and his people, a lot of them were Puritans, so a very stark view of the world and of their idea of a religious life. And the king was usurped and beheaded, and his son escaped to the continent in order to save himself, only then to come back later and take over the crown again after Cromwell's death. So this was interesting to us because of these two brothers, Duke Frederick and Duke Senior, and this usurpation of this dukedom. Um, and so that was the idea that we went for. Also, in terms of the pastoral comedy, what I learned as I studied the play more deeply for this production was that Shakespeare, in all of his brilliance, did something nobody else did, which was to turn the pastoral comedy on its ear. The play begins with all of the elements of tragedy. It is a stark, oppressive world that we come to when we meet Orlando and Rosalind and Celia, and a world that they must escape, not just to go to the woods and sing Hey Nani Nani, but in order to save their lives. So that's where we started.
A fun thing to watch for those of you who are going to see A Midsummer Night's Dream this afternoon is we're going to get the reverse thing. Yeah, so you can watch for that.
So, Isabel, I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk to our patrons here today about some of the things that you thought were really important as you worked with Robin on developing the background and the text of this play that they got to enjoy last night.
Sure. So Robin and I worked very closely on this from the start. We cut the script together and kind of developed our particular version of As You Like It. And in working on this play, I think one of the most important elements in it is the word if, which appears in the play 138 times, which is a lot.
Nice stat.
That conditional word.
Right. So Touchstone, actually, in that monologue at the very end of the play, ends it with if, and he talks about if, and finally, the word is actually described because if is a conditional word, and if is the word where anything can happen because it's not quite real because it's a conditional. And so Rosalind, of course, uses the word if a lot in this play. And that's how she avoids outright lying in the play, because in Shakespeare's era, swearing and oaths were of utmost importance, and you didn't want to break an oath. And so Rosalind actually avoids breaking oaths and swearing by using the word if a lot. Like, if she were a woman, then this would be happening. If this, then that. So she kind of avoids the actual promise and doesn't actually promise until the end of the play when she's back in her own womanly garb.
It's really important to, like, little hinges like that are so important, because this is a play full of you know, fantastic events, shocking events. We have brothers divided from brothers, who are actually want to kill each other. And then we have, banishments, and we have fantastic encounters in the forest, and we have Rosalind claiming to be a magician and being able to, change things. We have the encounters with lions and snakes. And so there is that all this conditional
One of the
imaginative
definitions
space.
was if as a noun, uncertain possibility,
Ah,
which, I think
uh-huh.
is part and
That's
parcel with
beautiful.
the theme of the play.
Yeah, that uncertain possibility. There's all this possibility in the play. Talk to us about some of the moments that you worked with in the play that you thought it really turns on, or maybe ones you really struggled to get your vision
Oh.
across.
Yeah, we're still in it, so I can't even begin to address.
Still in previews.
Any Shakespeare play has its incredible challenges, and this is not any different than any of the others. Some of the things we decided very early on were that we wanted to have in the play proper, the shift between Arden and the court happens with more frequency, but in our production, we just decided that when people decided to finally go to Arden, that they would go, and that we would never go back to the court. So there were decisions that we made like that, that then you struggle to justify it. You struggle to make it work. Um, but look, it's for good reason. It's one of the most famous and one of the best plays in the canon, and there's a lot for us to mine in As You Like It, and we're doing our best. Yeah.
So one of the most famous, there's some textual problems and textual inconsistencies that directors have to solve, the production companies have to solve. One of the most famous of those is what happens to Adam? He actually disappears from the text. That's Shakespeare. So could you talk a little bit about your decision process there?
I can't.
Oh no.
Mostly because I had an idea and there were other ideas, and so we come to something with our production that isn't necessarily something that I chose, but something that we try to make evolve as best we can. But Adam definitely is a character who appears and then doesn't appear, and many times in many productions, Adam will literally die on stage, or many times you'll have Adam coming back into the second part of the play. Uh, so our version of what happens to Adam is an evolution, for sure.
And that's theater as a collaborative art. I mean, people are coming to a decision-making process, and sometimes we think, the director is the grand god and controls everything together. If you've been in the room, oftentimes those decisions are very collaborative. Actors have ideas, dramaturgs have ideas, and oftentimes best idea wins as you work through that particular process.
So I want to spend a little bit of time talking with Robin and Isabel about Rosalind, the center of this play, this incredible female character. Can you talk with us about how you wanted to approach her as the central person in this play, and ideas or issues that you had to work on?
She's an iconic character in the canon and in all of literature. Many people talk about the struggle uh, to find her, and really the struggle always is just to be her, to rise to her, because she's a force of nature. However, one of the problems of the play and one of the challenges with any production is that if she is not surrounded by a Celia who is dynamic, the first part of the play is Celia's. There would be no escape to Arden without Celia.
It's her idea.
So
She drives it.
if Celia is not as heroic on many levels, as strong as Rosalind, if Orlando isn't as strong and as open a young man who's comfortable enough in his own skin in spite of what he's been through to have room for such a person in his life. If you don't have people surrounding Rosalind, characters that are as strong as she is, then Rosalind is nothing but a bossy, imperious, not very exciting person. And so the struggle always is to, yes, find Rosalind, but to find people in her world that remind her. Celia constantly reminds Rosalind who she is, where she came from, what is the right thing to do. And so the challenge with Rosalind is to remember that Rosalind is challenged, to remember that Rosalind at the beginning of the play is a young woman who's experienced so much loss that she has no real anchor into who she is. And it's only in the disguise of Ganymede, wearing a mask, that she begins to access her most authentic self. And I know Isabel has more to
Yeah,
say.
let's hear some of your thoughts.
From a textual note, she has the most lines of any female character in Shakespeare and is the only female character who ends a play in the entire canon. So that in itself, it kind of makes the role intimidating, I think, for any actress. But it's just about crafting people and crafting people with histories, because in this play, so many of the characters talk about their past lives, and Rosalind is included in this. And so it's about building a full and dynamic character, and also we do have to struggle with the fact that this part is written for a boy playing a woman, because Shakespeare's company was all men. So it would have been a man playing a woman pretending to be a man.
Yeah. It gets really complicated. Those, if you want to think about those layers of gender disguise, boy actor cross dresses to play the character of Rosalind, who cross dresses to play the character of Ganymede, who pretends to be Rosalind. Right? We have a whole bunch of layers there. Shakespeare loves a cross dressed heroine. You can probably name a few other plays that this happens in. One of the questions about this particular play, so they cross dress because, or she cross dresses because she's in danger. This is a really practical thing, right? Because I am more than common tall, I'm going to dress like a boy. This is going to protect their safety as they go out into the woods alone. They get out into Arden, and danger sort of disappears for them, right? Nobody's chasing them. Nobody seems to be looking for them anymore. So why does Rosalind stay cross-dressed?
Well, it is just not just Rosalind. I mean, Celia doesn't cross-dress, but Celia stays aliena.
In disguise.
Yes, in the
So why do they stay in
well,
disguise?
because they finally have an independent life. They buy their own place. They run it themselves. They go to see her father, and they spend all this time not identifying themselves to their father or to Orlando. And look, Shakespeare doesn't answer those questions for us. He doesn't give us their reasons why. We never have a scene where they discuss it. But for us, the idea of these two young women finally having an opportunity to go into the world and to live, is too enticing to let go of, at least at first. Plus, trust is at issue, especially for Rosalind. She has lost so much. She must be sure before she will open herself up to being that vulnerable again.
This is another one of those many plays of Shakespeare. If you're an experienced watcher of Shakespeare plays, you know that the mothers are somehow absent. They're just not there, and
Mom.
this makes a difference in any family. Any child who's lost a parent for whatever reason has to cope with that. And both of these young women, their mothers are not even mentioned in this play. In some plays, in Much Ado, you get the mothers mentioned, this and that here and there. But in As You Like It, they're just completely absent. And so these are two girls who are left with their fathers, and Rosalind doesn't even have that. And so that sense of loss is really profound and palpable, and it has to affect the way she makes decisions. And
It's also
so
worth remembering, I mentioned the Elizabethan period. We have a female monarch on the throne, right? This is 1599. She's on the throne until 1603. So she's reigned for a very long time. Um, Shakespeare's really exploring those gender dynamics that are cultural questions at the time.
Shall we turn to the audience?
Great. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll do our best. We have a great crowd here today. So who would like to launch the questions? I will run a microphone over to you. During these beginning seminars in the season, while we have the creative staff here with us, we do have these on tape. And if you want to revisit this moment and share it on your Facebook page, it's on the Utah Shakespeare Festival Education website.
Hi, I'm afraid I'm sort of the reason Nancy and Ace ran away.
Oh, no.
I'm that student, yes. What does happen to Adam in this version? Does he die, or does he just go asleep and is not seen, or are you deliberately leaving that up to the audience to figure out?
I'm leaving it open.
Also, could you talk about the various levels of love? Because the Touchstone and Audrey and the Phoebe and Silvius seem to come out of nowhere, and contrast them to the other pairs.
I think in a way, all of the love in this play comes out of nowhere. It's just a series of love at first sight. Orlando and Rosalind meet at the wrestling match and they fall in love. And there's actually very little text surrounding that. Celia and Oliver meet and they fall in love, and there's no text around that. And Touchstone and Audrey have met somewhere off in the woods and fallen in love, and they actually have a lot of text about their relationship. And Phoebe and Silvius, he's loved her for a while, but her love with him is kind of immediate after she kisses him.
And I mean, the Touchstone and Audrey is perhaps the earthiest of those, right? Touchstone sees Audrey, he desires her, and yeah, he's going to work his way around to marriage and perhaps real love eventually, but his motivation is perhaps slightly more basic than some of the other lovers in this play. But we do have these contrasting pairs of lovers, and it's really important to look at the way that they meet. And the love at first sight is so crucial, and to think about it in connection with some of the other shows we have in repertory this season. It's a beautifully constructed season this season. I think all the Elizabethan focus of the Shakespeare plays, all the Shakespeare shows themselves, and then Shakespeare in Love, all, in before 1600, we think, and the way they speak to each other is just wonderful. And love at first sight, we see it in Shakespeare in Love. And then Shakespeare mocks the love at first sight so roundly in A Midsummer Night's Dream with the magical interventions. And so it's a thing. I don't know if I believe in love at first sight.
Something to think about. Well, Shakespeare's certainly exploring it in these 1590s plays, that progression, courtship through marriage. As you get into the problem plays and Shakespeare's later comedies, he complicates that quite a bit, and the marriages will often happen earlier. An example is something like in the tragedies, Othello and Desdemona get married at the beginning, right? And then we see the complications coming after that. But these early sort of love in bloom, what is love? What is love at first sight? Why do we love? How do we love? Seems to be occupying Shakespeare quite a lot.
Right. Question and a comment. Morning, Robin. Thanks for our conversation yesterday. Just wanted to assure you that you've provided an incredibly magical production that I found enthralling from opening moment to closing moment. My only complaint, as I commented to the two delightful college students sitting to my right last night, was that I was sorry that it was over. That was my complaint. It's over. I was ready to sit through it again. Your actors, I'm sure, were too exhausted and wouldn't have come out and performed it for me. But a remarkable production, truly. And I did have a question concerning the way in which Michael Elich went about deciding how to interpret the set speech. And I've never seen anybody personalize it the way he did with the difficulties that he was experiencing with his hands near the end of it. And I was just curious what the process was between you and Mr. Elich, and how much was him, how much was you. I'm sure it was a combination and so forth. So
Yeah, I can't take any credit for his dynamic work. He's an incredible actor, and even for the most incredible actor, um, playing Jaques and knowing that you're going to say that speech is a tall order. However, the thing that we try to do all the time with any play, and certainly any famous play with a famous speech in it, is to bring it back to who we think this person is. And the one thing that Michael and I in discussion really started to become interested in terms of Jaques is the fact that he's a seeker. He seems to follow all these people around, that somehow getting displaced from the court has affected him in a way that perhaps some of the other Duke's men aren't as affected. He is not, he is out of sorts. He is not feeling himself. Whatever he expected to happen in the woods, it's not happening for him. And the idea that this person is going from shepherd to shepherd, trying to ask them to sit down and talk to him about their philosophy of life means that he is genuinely looking for something outside of himself. That somehow this entrance of Orlando and how off-putting it was with the threatening and all of that has thrown him into expressing something that pops into his head, and in trying to articulate himself as he goes through the speech. I think it happened in rehearsal once, quite, if I can use the word, rather organically, where he had his glasses on and that piece of the text came up and he just happened to put his hand there. And it was the idea that the lean and slippered pantaloon could be me. And that moment in a rehearsal one day was something that he began to play with then throughout the rest of our time together.
So then you see his, and that line got a big laugh last night because, you know, if you look around here, most of the people sitting here this morning and last night are not necessarily young, although there's a good smattering of young people in theater audience. But many of us, right, you get that reading glasses moment in your life, right? Your arm not long enough anymore, and you feel his sense of age very palpably. And so this connection to this famous 7 Ages of Man speech, and the sort of numerology that goes along with that, this idea that there are certain ages in your life where large changes are going to happen, and in this speech they're playing with the multiples of 7. Multiples of 9 were also a big deal, and so I thought that was really a strong moment. Who else has a question? I'm going to do with the back here, and then we'll come up in the front.
As you're walking over there, the actor David Suchet, some of you might know him as Poirot. He refers to these as purple passages, right? Any actor who comes to a role like this one thinking, I've got to do that speech, or I have to do Shylocks hath not a Jew eyes. You know, those particular challenges for an actor to find their way and make that their own, because there's so much received information. We all know great performances of that. We all know the speech inside and out. Audiences know it. So I really think our actor rose to the challenge on that one, providing I hadn't seen that choice either. And I've seen As You Like It so many times. So that particular choice of making the pantaloon him, I thought was brilliant. Yeah.
The character of Rosalind and the person who played that part, did you have any situations with that person be stronger or be weaker or anything?
No, I mean, Cassandra Bissell, who plays Rosalind for us, is a very exciting and generous actor. I think the hardest thing is the thing we talked about earlier, which is Rosalind talks a lot, and if she's not listening, her speeches are less interesting. So if anything, it was to sometimes take the pedal off the metal and just be present, listen. What spurs you into right action? What spurs you into this speech in this moment? What is it that he said that makes you say, no, no, Orlando, it's this. And so we took a lot of time to look at those moments and try to develop them.
The music, the songs, was that something that was your vision or was that thrust upon you? And how difficult was it to decide where, when, how much did you work with the songwriters as far as lyrics, etc., to make it all work?
As You Like It, like a lot of Shakespeare's plays, a lot of the comedies, has music in it. So the Forest Lord songs are in the play. Then as you start to talk and think, you think, do we want to bookend our production with music? We thought, what if there is no music in the Duke's court? No real oral experience, that bird song and music and those kinds of aspects of life come alive in this production only in Arden. So that was a place that we started with. Matt Tibbs, our sound designer, when we spoke initially and we were talking about the Forest Lord songs, I really love folk songs. I love story songs. Shakespeare's songs have stories connected to them. So he made me a playlist of folk music, and we began to listen to music that we thought might be resonant for us in terms of where Amiens and the Forest Lords are. The festival hired a young composer, Brandon Grayson, who worked with Matt, and together they came up with instrumentation that we wanted a fiddle. Could we have a concertina? We never did get one, but we thought about one. A mandolin, a couple of guitars, and then how do we weave some of that music throughout the production when Shakespeare isn't necessarily calling for it? So that was something that we did in collaboration with each other. And sometimes we had to do it in order to create the passage of time. For example, when Celia says, "And I'll sleep," because we had inverted a court scene that's supposed to take place after that, we knew the next scene, Rosalind comes right back on. So we wanted to create the illusion of time passing, which is why we had that, what we call our Celia lullaby moment.
We're also lucky enough to have with us at the festival for the first time this year an actor that I'm very familiar with. His name's John Harrell, from the American Shakespeare Center. He plays Amiens, and he's the Lord who sings the most in this production. And so he's, at the American Shakespeare Center, which is in Stanton, Virginia, and it's near Charlottesville. They do tons and tons of live music on the stage in the plays as a part of recreating at least a vision of Shakespeare's original staging conditions. We know that players in Shakespeare's times all had to be skilled actors and dancers and singers and probably swordsmen as well. And so this is one of the things that Elizabethan audiences wanted when they went to the Playhouse, was to hear music and song.
Can I say about John Harrell just
Yes.
for a minute here,
Yeah.
that in that beginning of identifying the music, then it was very important that we tried to find that festival leadership found an actor that could not only play Le Beau, play Amiens, but play music, lead the band, because all of us go away and they all remain for months and months and months. So John is an integral part of this production, and we're so lucky to have him.
Shakespeare's audience also expected a jig at the end, so I thought we got a nice reference to that. They came for the music and the dancing as well.
Okay, who else has a question or comment? I had one back there that I pointed at, and then I forgot who it was. Okay, you, and then I'll come over here to you, sir.
Thank you for an excellent production.
Oh, thanks.
The costumes were fun. The wrestling match, as one who has wrestled when I was young enough to wrestle, there were a couple of falls that I was very concerned about. And I felt the pain of the man going down over the knee kind of thing, and it was exceptionally well done.
Jeff Kent in our company, who plays Orlando's older brother Oliver, is also a very accomplished fight choreographer.
Yeah.
So Jeff choreographed that wrestling match.
It was apparent that it was exceptionally well done, and so anyway, kudos to that, and
I will
hopefully
pass it
passed
on.
along. The costuming was wonderful. I was talking this morning over breakfast with some other individuals who had been attending the play, and we were a little curious as the scenes were progressing and the suitcases came on, as well as the bicycle. And I don't remember if Cromwell had a bicycle or not, or if he had Samsonite luggage, but we were a little curious about that. It seemed to have a little twist in it that we weren't expecting.
All right. I'm going to answer it in two ways. One way is this. For anybody who's a Harry Potter fan here, there's a room called the Room of Requirement in Hogwarts where you can hide anything and you can receive anything. And there were many times when I was doing the research and my brain would turn to mush that I would think, oh yeah, the Forest of Arden is kind of a room of requirement. As you like it, anything can be. In the production that I was a part of in 1979, Sir Oliver Martex rode a bike. I remember that fondly. The idea of this vicar that was going from parish to parish to sort of meet his flock. So we knew we wanted that. And the suitcases, we wanted the women to, especially Celia, she's the one that says we have to get our jewels and everything that perhaps she overpacks for Arden. So we got some stuff, and so the Room of Requirement is one justification I will make for those choices. The other is magical realism.
Speaking of cross-dressing, you have a cross-dressing minstrel, and I'm wondering whether that was on purpose, or maybe it's just because she's supposed to be a lord. And as I recall, I think she's the only one with the beard, isn't she, of the four lords?
Okay, so you have the challenge of doing As You Like It, where a choice that a woman makes to dress as a man is a very dynamic and dangerous choice. And so, yeah, we were looking for a string instrumentalist who was male. And Jennifer Vosters, who is incredibly gifted, is the person that we found. And so then the dilemma is, we don't want to muddy the water with cross-dressing women, because it's Rosalind's story and she's the one that does that. However, if you put her in a dress, she looks like the Forest Lord's domestic help or worse. And we couldn't have that. So, try as best we can. She's in disguise. And she's playing a man. And we'll leave it at that.
And leave it at that. Okay, who else has a comment or a question?
I'm surprised the Queen wasn't more influential during that time to have women actors.
That is a very interesting historical problem. Isabel, would you like to speak about that?
The issue of acting is this just really long moral issue, essentially, and it's a religious issue as well. And the Queen had a lot of people to keep happy at once. So even if she wanted to see women on the stage, it wasn't the correct political atmosphere for her to make that happen. And she did also ban theaters outside of the city limits. And I think that we see her influence in these plays, in these cross-dressed women who are strong female characters who dress up as men and do a man's role, which is what Queen Elizabeth was doing. And we actually see the height of the cross-dressing characters, Viola and Rosalind, in this time period. And we don't see, and she dies in 1603, Queen Elizabeth, and we don't see another cross-dressed character until much later with Cymbeline.
Yeah. And this is a really interesting thing because on the continent, playing companies were comprised of men and women. So this is a thing that's peculiar to England. and that no one fully understands all of the reasons why they stuck with the all male playing companies, whereas, French companies or German companies may have had female players. We do know that when the plays were revived at the Restoration, that Shakespeare's comedies, which featured cross-dressing heroines, were among the first plays staged when Charles II, who loved the theater, grew up in France, loved the theater, and loved women and loved actresses in particular.
In 1660.
Yeah, that he opened the playing companies, licensed them to reopen, and that these Shakespeare comedies featuring cross-dressing heroines were staged frequently because it let women come on stage in pants. And think about it. If you're not used to seeing a woman in trousers, that's a pretty exciting thing.
Yeah. It's also worth noting that the foreign visitors that Kate mentioned, that women were on stage in France, for example, when they would visit England, they commented on how peculiar this was. So this native English tradition that is in some ways coming out of medieval and church dramas that continues to exist through Shakespeare's time. There's a lovely stage play that's been made into a film that talks about this moment in the Restoration in the 1660s called Stage Beauty. Has anyone seen this? That sort of Yeah, there's a film as well that really looks at that moment when the theaters reopened and women started to be on stage. Women were on stage in court masks, so there were court performances that had women.
Oh, I was just going to that private performances, women could do things, but also, do you really want to go up against a British trade union?
That's right. Yeah.
It's true. Okay, other questions or comments? Or anybody need to move because it's getting very sunny? You should feel free to shift around. As we said, it's not impolite in this case for you to do that. Okay, at
In
the back.
there. Kate, you're getting your steps in this morning.
I am getting my exercise. She'll sit by you.
I was just curious why Adam didn't come out or Fred didn't come out at the very end for the final applause.
In our union, if an actor is done before intermission, they have the option of coming back for curtain call or going home. And Fred wanted to go home. And Fred will not be denied.
Yeah.
It's a long play. It's not done till 11. When you're in the first few scenes, that's a long time to wait to come back on
It's
stage.
a long time to sit around backstage doing nothing, which is why the union gives actors that option, I suppose. All right, other questions, comments? Who needs something clarified? Has a thought to share?
I'd just like to say I really like the scene change to the forest.
Oh, okay. So you want to talk about the scenic design a little bit and how you made those choices and working
Scott
with the designer?
Davis, who scenic designer for As You Like It, designed all 3 outdoor shows, and the decision was made that we would basically have a base set for all 3 productions. And so we knew that the most dynamic thing that would happen in As You Like It would be the shift into Arden. And how do we do that without introducing a bunch of scenery and having things drop from the sky? We wanted to do it simply. We wanted to sort of illustrate a forest without creating one realistically. Also, the thing that we really love about Shakespeare is that Shakespeare says, "We are here and we are." Do we need a lot of stuff in order to illustrate that? And we didn't think we did. So the idea of the screens in the back that are painted to look like trees, the fact that the columns are there and we can endow them with our sense of